Olivier was astonishing. I actually consider myself incredibly blessed because I worked with Olivier.
It was 1938, and Laurence Olivier was secretly selling his wife's jewelry just to buy food. Hollywood offered him a fortune, but demanded his soul in return. What happened next split his world in two, forcing him to choose between artistic integrity and survival. Today, we're revealing the real reason this theater legend almost walked away from it all. Laurence Olivier was born on May 22, 1907, in Dorking, England. His father, Gerard, was a very strict high Anglican priest who came from a long line of religious leaders. Their home was full of rules and strict routines tied to church life. But surprisingly, it was Gerard who noticed young Laurence's love for performing and encouraged it, even though he was serious and strict. The family moved a lot because of Gerard's work, and this gave Laurence the chance to meet all kinds of people. When Laurence was 12, his life changed forever. His mother, Agnes, died in 1920. She had been the warm and loving part of his life, making their strict home feel a bit softer. Losing her left him deeply hurt, and this pain stayed with him his whole life. It even showed in the strong emotions he brought to his acting. As a boy, Laurence also had a strange habit of lying. He loved making up stories so much that even his parents worried about it. But later, he realized this skill was perfect for acting. He once said, "Acting is just lying, and good acting is convincing lying." Laurence's love for acting first showed in school plays. At just 9 years old, he played Brutus in a short version of Julius Caesar. A famous actress, Ellen Terry, saw the performance and said he was already a great actor. Church services, led by his father, also inspired him. Laurence loved the drama and rituals of it. At home, he even set up a little stage in his room where he performed speeches from Shakespeare that his mother had taught him. When Laurence was 17, he joined the Central School of Speech and Drama in London. The school was run by Elsie Fogarty, who was famous for training great actors. While Laurence wasn't the most serious student, Fogarty saw his talent. She later said Laurence stood out among all her students. One of his classmates, Peggy Ashcroft, who would also become famous, found him a bit rough at first, but lively and full of energy. At 19, Laurence joined the Birmingham Repertory Company, a decision that changed his life. The company was known for giving young actors lots of opportunities. Laurence performed in many plays, sometimes taking on several roles in a short time. In 1 month, he acted in 3 different productions, learning and improving with every performance. During this time, he met Ralph Richardson, another young actor. They became close friends and rivals, and their careers would stay connected for decades. When Laurence Olivier was 23 years old, his life changed forever. On September 24, 1930, he performed in a play called Private Lives at the Phoenix Theatre in London. He played a supporting role, Victor Prynne, in a story about a divorced couple who meet again on their honeymoons with new spouses. How Olivier got the role was almost like luck. Noel Coward, the famous playwright, had seen Olivier perform in another play and thought he had potential. Even though Olivier was new to acting, Coward gave him the part. During rehearsals, Olivier worked alongside Coward, who also acted in the play, and Gertrude Lawrence, a famous actress. They were both so skilled that Olivier learned a lot from them. When the play opened, it was an instant hit. People loved the bold and funny story, and Olivier's performance got a lot of praise. Even though he wasn't the main character, critics noticed how good he was. This success led to more opportunities for Olivier and gave him the confidence to aim for bigger roles. After Private Lives, he got his first big Hollywood contract with RKO Pictures. It was 1930, and this was a huge deal for him. He had just done well on stage and was now being offered $1,000 a week for 2 movies. That was a fortune compared to the little money he earned in London theaters. But this exciting offer also scared him. He talked to his mentor, Noel Coward, who wasn't very supportive. Coward told him he was throwing away his artistic integrity. Despite this, Olivier decided to take the deal. The money and the idea of working in glamorous Hollywood were too tempting to resist. Leaving for Hollywood wasn't easy. Olivier's wife, Jill Esmond, was pregnant, and he had to leave her behind. At the time, Jill was actually more famous than he was in England. RKO even thought about using her fame to help Olivier and suggested he change his name to Larry Olivier to sound more American. Olivier refused. He wanted to keep his real name, showing early on that he wouldn't let anyone control him too much. But things didn't go smoothly. Olivier was used to acting on stage, where everything had to be big and dramatic so the audience could see and hear. In movies, that didn't work. His first screen test went horribly. He tried to show intense emotions by making big faces, but it ended up looking silly. The people watching didn't like it. One of them even said he had no future in movies. Olivier wasn't happy with film either. He thought movies weren't as good as theater, and even called them weak. This attitude caused problems on set. While filming Friends and Lovers in 1931, the director kept telling him to tone things down. In one scene, Olivier just had to walk across the room and sit, but he kept making it too dramatic. After 23 takes, the director lost his patience and yelled at him to simply walk and sit. His first 2 movies, Friends and Lovers and The Yellow Ticket, didn't go well. In Friends and Lovers, he had trouble working with his co-stars. One actress, Lily Damita, got so frustrated with him that she slapped him and stormed off. Critics weren't kind either. They said his acting was stiff and unnatural. The Yellow Ticket was slightly better, but Olivier's performance still didn't stand out. People barely mentioned him in reviews. These failures hurt him deeply. He wrote to his wife, saying he felt like the camera hated him and he hated it back. He started wondering if he'd made a huge mistake by going to Hollywood. Things got even worse with his next movie, Westward Passage in 1932. This was supposed to be a big chance for Olivier to shine. Instead, it flopped. The movie lost a lot of money, and critics didn't like Olivier's acting. They said he was too over the top and didn't fit the role. After this, RKO decided not to renew his contract. Olivier found out about this in a really embarrassing way. He read it in the news instead of being told directly. Feeling humiliated, he decided to leave Hollywood and go back to London. He was so broke that he had to borrow money to pay for his trip home. However, Laurence Olivier was only 26 years old in July 1933 when he got a shocking news. MGM had picked him to play Don Antonio, the love interest of Greta Garbo, in the big movie Queen Christina. Garbo was a superstar, and she had complete control over the film. She even chose who acted with her. Many famous actors like Leslie Howard and Cary Grant wanted the role, so it was shocking that Olivier, who was still mostly unknown in Hollywood, got the part. Garbo had seen him act in Westward Passage and liked his performance, which is why she asked for him. The British press went crazy, calling him Greta's leading man. Olivier felt like a hero and believed this was his big break. He sailed to Hollywood feeling confident and excited, especially since the job paid $1,500 a week, which was a huge amount during the Great Depression. When Olivier arrived in Hollywood in August 1933, everything seemed perfect. Queen Christina was going to be a huge movie, with a budget of over $1 million. MGM promoted him everywhere. putting his face in newspapers and calling him the next big thing. The role of Don Antonio was important. It needed someone romantic and dramatic, and MGM thought Olivier had what it took. He threw himself into the role completely. He studied the history of 17th century Sweden and Spain to understand the character better. He even grew a mustache to look more sophisticated and practiced a Spanish accent. MGM made sure he took fencing lessons too, because there was going to be a big duel scene. Olivier wrote letters home to his wife, Jill Esmond, saying how amazing Hollywood was and how excited he was to work with director Ruben Mamoulian. Olivier started dreaming about staying in California forever. Everything seemed perfect, but things were about to go horribly wrong. Rehearsals started in mid-August, and right away, it was clear there was a problem. Olivier and Garbo had no chemistry at all. Instead of looking like two people in love, their scenes were awkward and stiff. Garbo, who was famous for being passionate on screen, didn't react to Olivier's acting. In one love scene, Olivier tried to bring out her passion, as the script said, but she just stared at him blankly. He got nervous and started overacting, which only made things worse. The director, Ruben Mamoulian, watched helplessly as the romantic scenes fell flat. Garbo didn't seem comfortable with Olivier either. When he touched her, she would pull away, and she looked more annoyed than in love. The crew started whispering about how bad the scenes were. Olivier noticed the gossip, which made him even more nervous. He began forgetting his lines and even lost his British accent during the takes. He later wrote about this terrible experience, saying, "I took Garbo in my arms to awaken her passion, but there was nothing, no flicker, no spark. I was miserable and overacted." After 2 weeks of this disaster, Olivier was called into producer Walter Wanger's office on August 29, 1933. He was told he was being replaced because he didn't have chemistry with Garbo. It was devastating news. To make things even worse, his replacement was John Gilbert, who had been Garbo's lover and co-star in her silent movies. Gilbert's career wasn't doing well at the time, but Garbo specifically asked for him, and the studio agreed. Olivier got paid his $6,000 salary, but his Hollywood dream was over before it even began. The news spread quickly, and trade papers like Variety made fun of him with headlines like, "Garbo gives Olivier the cold shoulder." On September 2nd, he left California and went back to England, feeling humiliated. When Olivier returned to England, he was crushed. He felt like a failure and couldn't stop thinking about what had gone wrong. He became depressed and doubted whether he was good enough to act in movies at all. For months, he avoided talking about what had happened because he was too embarrassed. He was terrified that people in the British theater world would mock him for failing in Hollywood. Olivier's dream of becoming a Hollywood star seemed completely destroyed. Then, on September 15, 1933, he performed in Twelfth Night at the Old Vic Theatre in London. The audience loved it so much that they gave him a standing ovation for over 7 minutes. This marked his big return to the stage. Over the next 4 years, he worked incredibly hard, performing in 22 different plays. He rehearsed up to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. In November 1935, he performed as Romeo in Romeo and Juliet at the New Theatre. He shared the roles of Romeo and Mercutio with another actor, John Gielgud, switching roles on different nights. Crowds of over 2,000 people came to see him, proving how much his performances stood out. Olivier also made a return to British films. On April 7, 1936, he starred in As You Like It, which was the first Shakespeare play adapted as a sound film. It wasn't a big hit, but still made £17,500 in its first week. Critics praised his screen presence, calling him magnetic. This success encouraged him to keep working in films. In 1937, Olivier acted in Fire Over England, which was released on February 25th. It became a big success, earning £75,000 in its first month. He played a young naval officer during Queen Elizabeth I's time and was praised for his powerful screen presence and perfect delivery of Elizabethan dialogue. In 1939, he starred in Q Planes, an espionage thriller where he played Tony McVeigh, a journalist investigating mysterious plane disappearances. The film cost £80,000 to make, but earned £120,000, making it a box office hit. Critics loved his wit and charm in the role and called it one of his best performances. Between 1937 and 1939, he acted in 7 British films and worked up to 16 hours a day to perfect his craft. For Q Planes, he even spent 3 weeks following real journalists to make his performance more realistic. Hollywood came calling again in 1938, but Olivier was hesitant. On July 15th, he was offered the role of Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights for $50,000 for just 12 weeks of work. He turned it down 3 times, still remembering how badly things had gone for him in Hollywood before. However, after a long 4-hour phone call with producer Samuel Goldwyn, he finally agreed to play Heathcliff on August 2nd, 1938. Filming Wuthering Heights wasn't easy. Olivier and director William Wyler argued 37 times during the 14 weeks of shooting. One day, Wyler made Olivier do the same shot 72 times. Frustrated, Olivier shouted, "How do you want me to do it?" "I've done it every way possible." Wyler calmly replied, "I want it better." This made Olivier even angrier, and he insulted film acting, saying it was a weak and boring art form. Wyler didn't back down and humiliated Olivier in front of the entire cast and crew. To make things worse, Olivier didn't get along with his co-star, Merle Oberon, calling her an amateur. All these fights caused filming to take much longer than planned and cost a lot more money. Even though filming was tough, it forced Olivier to change the way he acted in films. At first, his acting style was too dramatic, like he was still on stage. Wyler worked hard to fix this, making him redo scenes over and over again. In one scene, Olivier had to say a single line 37 times. This made him angry, but it also helped him learn. He eventually realized that in films, small, quiet expressions could say more than loud, dramatic ones. When Wuthering Heights came out in April 1939, it was a big hit. Audiences loved it, and it grossed $624,643 during its initial run, a huge amount for the time. Critics praised the film, with the New York Times calling it sinister and wild as it was meant to be. The movie stood out even in 1939, a year filled with legendary films like Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. Olivier's role as Heathcliff earned him his first Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Even though he didn't win, the nomination proved he could succeed as a film actor. He attended the ceremony with Vivien Leigh, who won Best Actress for Gone with the Wind. This was just the beginning of Olivier's long history with the Oscars, as he would go on to earn many more nominations. However, Olivier had mixed feelings about his new fame. On one hand, he enjoyed the attention and financial rewards, with his salary jumping from $3,000 a week during filming to $50,000 for his next project, Rebecca. Fan mail poured in, with Olivier receiving 2,000 letters a week. Companies offered him lucrative deals, like a $100,000 contract to endorse Lucky Strike cigarettes, though he turned it down. But the fame also had a downside. He hated losing his privacy, once complaining, "I can't even buy a pair of socks without being mobbed." When World War II started in September 1939, Laurence Olivier was in Hollywood. He had just finished filming Wuthering Heights and was starting to become a big star. But he felt a strong pull to go back to Britain and help his country. He quickly booked a spot on the SS Washington, one of the last ships to cross the Atlantic safely before the war made travel too dangerous. When he got back to England in 1940, Olivier tried to join the Royal Air Force, but they told him he was too old. He didn't give up. Instead, he joined the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve and trained to be a pilot. He flew for a while, logging about 200 hours, but his time in the military didn't last long. The British government asked him to stop and focus on acting to help lift people's spirits during the war. Olivier felt torn. He wanted to fight like so many others, but he also knew his acting could make a difference. Later, he wrote that he felt guilty, but realized his true duty might be using his talents to inspire others. In 1941, Olivier joined the Fleet Air Arm, a branch of the Navy, and trained again as a pilot. He learned navigation and meteorology and flew planes, something he described as thrilling and scary at the same time. But before he could serve for long, the Ministry of Information approached him with a new idea. They wanted him to star in a patriotic movie called In Which We Serve. The government believed the film could boost morale, and Olivier's role would make it even more powerful. He was released from active duty in 1941 to work on the movie. Although he struggled with leaving the military again, he agreed. When the film came out in 1942, it was a big success, showing how much his work could help during the war. Olivier then took on an even bigger project, directing and starring in a film version of Shakespeare's Henry V. It was a massive challenge. Bombing raids kept interrupting filming, and wartime shortages made it hard to get materials. But Olivier didn't give up. The film had a huge budget for its time, and Olivier even mortgaged his house to help pay for it. He worked endlessly, acting as King Henry while also directing every scene. He made sure the story felt meaningful to audiences during the war, highlighting Henry's leadership and courage. The famous St. Crispin's Day speech was filmed to inspire unity and determination, much like what Britain needed against Nazi Germany. When Henry V came out in 1944, it was an instant hit. Audiences loved it, and it ran for 15 weeks in London. Critics praised the way Olivier blended the play's theatrical roots with realistic battle scenes. The film was seen as a symbol of Britain's strength during the war, and Olivier's work earned him a special Academy Award in 1947. Laurence Olivier's life after World War II was full of big successes and hard struggles. In 1948, he made a movie version of Hamlet that amazed everyone. It became the first non-American film to win the Oscar for Best Picture, and Olivier himself won Best Actor, making history as the first person to direct themselves to that award. The movie was made quickly, in just 21 days, with a small budget of £527,000, which would be about £19 million today. Olivier filmed it in black and white, claiming it was an artistic choice, but later admitted it was because of an argument with Technicolor. His version of Hamlet was bold. He focused on the character's inner thoughts and even hinted at a complex relationship with his mother. To make the story tighter, he cut almost 2 hours from the original play, leaving out characters like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. This upset some fans of Shakespeare, but the audience loved it. His creative use of voiceovers and dramatic visuals changed how Shakespeare's works were shown in movies. One odd thing about the film was the casting. Olivier, at 41, played Hamlet, while Eileen Hurley, only 30, played his mother, Gertrude. This added a strange layer to their scenes together. Still, the movie was a huge hit. It made over $3.25 million in the US, which was a lot for a Shakespeare movie in those days. It also made Olivier the most famous Shakespeare actor of his time. In 1963, Olivier achieved a lifelong dream by starting Britain's National Theatre. It was an idea people had been talking about for over 100 years, but it was Olivier's talent and determination that finally made it happen. He was chosen as the first director, taking a small salary of £10,000 a year, even though he could have earned much more in Hollywood. The National Theatre opened at the Old Vic Theatre with Hamlet, starring Peter O'Toole. Olivier brought together 77 actors, including future stars like Maggie Smith and Derek Jacobi. Sometimes this caused problems because older actors didn't like how much attention the younger ones got. Olivier wasn't afraid to take risks. In 1964, he approved a play called A Patriot for Me that included controversial themes. This upset censors, so the theater had to turn into a private club to show the play. People even wanted Olivier to lose his knighthood over it, but he stuck to his beliefs. Running the theater wasn't easy. Olivier worked so hard that his health began to fail. In 1967, he nearly died from thrombosis, but kept working until 1973, when he helped move the theater to its new home. Olivier's personal life was just as dramatic. His marriage to Vivien Leigh started as a fairy tale but ended in heartbreak. They married in 1940, but Leigh's mental health began to decline in the late 1940s. She suffered from bipolar disorder, which led to public breakdowns. In 1953, while filming Elephant Walk in Sri Lanka, she had a severe episode, attacking her co-star and running naked through the hotel, screaming Olivier's name. She was sent back to the US, and Olivier brought her home to England. Leigh also suffered several miscarriages, which only added to the pain. In 1957, Olivier started an affair with actress Joan Plowright, leading to a divorce in 1961. Even though they separated, Leigh's death in 1967 devastated Olivier, who said it felt like losing her all over again. Olivier was a workaholic, often pushing himself to the limit. In 1949, he performed in nearly 300 stage shows while also filming Carrie. In 1950, he became seriously ill with pleurisy, but returned to the stage after just 2 weeks. He even performed with an oxygen tank nearby. His dedication to his craft sometimes hurt his personal relationships. His son, from his first marriage, said he barely saw his father growing up. Olivier's relationship with Hollywood became strained over time. He disliked how commercial and shallow the industry felt. In 1965, while filming Othello, he fought with producers who wanted to change an actor's voice, calling it disrespectful. He also criticized method acting, saying it was nonsense, which led to a public argument with Marlon Brando. By 1967, he turned down a role in The Merchant of Venice because the studio wanted to set it in Las Vegas. Olivier wrote a long, angry letter to the studio, which effectively ended his Hollywood career. In his later years, Olivier focused on smaller films and TV roles that gave him more creative control. Some younger audiences remembered him for commercial roles, like Zeus in Clash of the Titans, but his groundbreaking work in Shakespeare adaptations remained his true legacy. Laurence Olivier decided to stay in Hollywood in the late 1930s because he was in serious trouble with money and needed to take care of his family. By 1938, he owed a huge £20,000, which today would be more than £1.3 million. He got into this mess because of bad investments and spending too much. Things got worse after his son, Tarquin, was born in 1936. His wife, Jill Esmond, became very ill with postpartum depression and needed expensive medical care. Olivier was so desperate that he secretly sold Jill's jewelry just to buy food. He even thought about declaring bankruptcy, which would have ruined his reputation. At this terrible time, Hollywood gave him a way out. MGM's boss, Louis B. Mayer, offered him $50,000 per movie, about $920,000 in today's money. It was enough to pay off his debts and take care of his family. But there was a catch. Olivier had to sign a 7-year contract, which meant staying in Hollywood and giving up theater for a long time. Olivier hated this idea. He thought film was not as meaningful as theater. In his diary, he wrote that he felt like he was selling his soul to the celluloid devil, but had no choice. He said, "My boy must eat, and Jill must have her doctors." At first, Olivier didn't understand how powerful movies could be. That changed in 1939 while he was filming Wuthering Heights. One day, after fighting with the director, William Wyler, he left the set and wandered into a small town. There, he saw a little movie theater showing his 1937 film, Fire Over England. Curious, he went inside. The place was full of people, all watching his performance on the screen. He was shocked. In just one showing, he had reached more people than he could in a whole week on stage at London's Old Vic Theatre. That moment opened his eyes. In his autobiography, he wrote, "I stood there, slack-jawed, watching myself on that flickering screen, and it was as if scales fell from my eyes." He later learned that Fire Over England had been seen by 15 million people around the world. He began to see film not as a compromise, but as a way to touch far more lives than theater ever could. He even wrote to his friend Ralph Richardson saying, "I fear I may have been terribly wrong about this film business. There is a magic here, a reach that our beloved stage can never match." This idea became even stronger in 1943, when Olivier was serving in the Royal Navy during World War II. The British government came to him with a big request. They wanted him to make a movie version of Shakespeare's Henry V to inspire soldiers and civilians during the war. Olivier had been feeling frustrated in the military, so he was eager to do something meaningful. The government promised him a huge budget, military help for battle scenes, and even planes from the Royal Air Force. Olivier became even more motivated after seeing how Nazi propaganda films influenced German soldiers. He realized how powerful movies could be for inspiring people. In a letter to the War Office, he wrote, "I have seen the enemy's weapon, and it is celluloid. If we can harness Shakespeare's words to this medium, we might just win not only the war, but the peace that follows." The movie, released in 1944, was a huge success. It played in packed theaters in Britain and across the Allied countries. In the US alone, more than 8.5 million people saw it in its first year. Olivier received letters from people saying the movie changed how they saw Shakespeare. One miner from Wales wrote, "Sir, I never understood Shakespeare before, but your film made me feel as though the old bard was speaking directly to me. I've since bought a copy of the play and read it thrice."